cover a few topics today, Mr. Griffin, and one of those would be the outpouring of vindication those of us in the so-called crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist groups have seen this past year, including the recent release of JFK classified documents. Now, of course, there was somewhat of a limited hangout scenario with the JFK files. Obviously, a lot was still omitted, but we still saw a lot of interesting facts come forward. After all these years, what do you think of these JFK documents, and what do you really think happened to JFK?
Oh, okay. Well, the first one is easy. You're absolutely right. The documents are being dribbled out, and it's pathetically funny when you look at the images of these sheets. They say, "Oh, we just uncovered all these great secrets of the JFK assassination," and you look at the documents, and 85% of them are inked out.
Yeah, it's a joke.
So you can imagine if we're making these profound discoveries, what's still inked out. It's even worse than what they've allowed to be known.
Well, I saw one page that was 100% inked out. There wasn't a single word on the entire page. How is that a release?
Yeah, how is that a release? And anyway, and it is profound in the sense that there's enough that has been released to prove without any question that there was a cover-up, and that's the important thing. Now we can discuss the extent to which the data was covered up and to which it was distorted and to which information was withheld even from the Warren Commission. But there's no question that it was a cover-up, and that's all we really need to know in order to get that tinfoil hat off of the head. Because, and it goes on the heads of the other people that have been saying, oh, well, this was an honest investigation. These people were honorable. They weren't trying to hide anything. Now they're the ones wearing the tinfoil hats. We know, for example, now, the most profound thing is that Oswald himself was working for the government, and he was an undercover agent. Now, what more do you need to know?
Yeah.
And you know that everyone on the Warren Commission knew that, especially Earl Warren himself. And so you take it from there. It proves the fact that we're in the grips of a organized criminal gang, and they've captured our government.
Absolutely.
About it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just going into facts that we've known for so many years regarding, former President Gerald Ford, when he was on the Warren Commission, of course, he came out and said in the 1970s that during the Warren Commission, the CIA destroyed information, documents, and basically deep-sixed the whole investigation. And then there's people like George de Mohrenschildt, who was best friends with Oswald, who incredibly worked for the CIA, and his brother created a big propaganda wing of the CIA in the 1940s.
Yeah, and the timely losing of the documents that the CIA had just a couple of months before this came out.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the Harvey Oswald.
Absolutely. There's so many things that come into this story, and of course I did a recent documentary on it, and we kind of just went into all this information. There's more than people realize out there. Just even the connection to Nixon and Watergate, and I think it was Operation 40. So many examples of things all tying together that I think about 99% of people I talk to today, regardless of if they're in the so-called conspiracy world or not, don't believe the official story, which says a lot about what a bit of time can do to conspiracy or a cover-up. But Mr. Griffin, you have obviously you wrote the Creature from Jekyll Island, and there is this recurring theory that I think it would be great for you to be able to debunk right now, because so many seem to believe that JFK was killed because of the Federal Reserve due to Executive Order 11110, which, as a matter of fact, actually gave more power to the Fed. Can you debunk this for the audience once and for all, as one of the great Federal Reserve researchers?
Well, I don't know about that last part, but I can certainly try. I think it's not that I would debunk it, but the facts do not support it. Let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. You've got a very ornate story that, frankly, a lot of people want to believe. In fact, I wanted to believe it when I first heard it, that Kennedy was killed by agents of the international banking system because he was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to return America's money back to solid money and all of that. I thought, well, wouldn't that be wonderful? And it would help me prove my case against the Federal Reserve, because I knew it certainly was not impossible for that to happen. But fortunately, I took the time to delve into the facts and see if I could get to the original documents myself. So if I were to say that this was the case, I'd be able to hold up the document. I'd point to this piece of evidence and say, there it is. It's not me saying it. Here's the evidence, the historical evidence. But I couldn't find any of that. In fact, I found just the opposite. And for those who are interested in the details, about half of it, or a third of it, is in my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. But there's more to it than that. And if you want to go online to freedomforceinternational.org and look it up under the issues section, I have a rather long essay on this issue. But here are the basic facts. First of all, this information, as it first came out, included the idea that Kennedy gave a speech at Columbia University in which he said, I have uncovered this truth and I have to warn the American people about it before, while there still is time, and all of this sort of thing. And he didn't say anything about the Federal Reserve, but since that line was packaged in with the assassination, the reader would naturally assume that he was talking about the Federal Reserve. But I thought, let's see what he was talking about. And so I called Columbia University and said, President Kennedy gave a speech there on such and such a date. I've forgotten the date, but is it possible to get a copy of that speech? And people, they said, well, sure, we'll check into that and get back to you. Well, a few days later, I got a call, and they said, Mr. Griffin, we've checked, and President Kennedy did not give a speech here on that date, nor any other date. He's never spoken at Columbia University. I said, really? Oh, yes, sir, that's true. And I said, well, wow, I didn't know that. Well, thank you very much. So I searched around to see if he had given that speech or anything like it on that date. I looked through the internet. I found no record of it. So I got the bright idea, I'll call the White House. So I called the White House and spoke to their secretarial staff. And I said, I know that there's a record, or I hear that there's a record of the president's occupation for during a day, of what he was, what his itinerary was. Can you tell me where he was and what he was doing on such and such a date? And she said, well, we'll look it up. And they called me back and said, well, on that date, President Kennedy was here in the Oval Office. And then they started to read off his appointments. It was all day long. He had appointments mostly with ambassadors from other countries. So that's where the president was on that day, if you assume that they're telling the truth. But I didn't tell the ladies why I wanted to know. And there was no great item in the news for people to be alerted to hide information about that date. Who cares, you know? Yeah. So it seemed like it was authentic. So then I got to looking deeper, and I realized then I started to question. JFK, even though he's greatly admired by the American people, we must understand he was a globalist. Mm-hmm. We must also understand that he was a graduate from the London School of Economics, which was completely operated by the Fabian Socialist Society in the UK. Mm-hmm. Fabian Socialist Society is a semi-secret organization. It's part of the Rhodesian group. It's part of this international web with a lot of interlocking with the Council on Foreign Relations and interlocking with the Communist Internationale. It goes all the way back to that. These people are total collectivists of the socialist communist style. But the Fabian Society came primarily from the wealthy, well-educated class of Great Britain at the time. And they're the people that built or funded the London School of Economics, and the whole purpose was to teach Fabian socialism to their graduates. And you look at the list of graduates of that school, and they're all ambassadors, they're ministers of their countries, and they're all globalists, every one of them, because that's what the purpose of the school was. So, well, isn't that interesting? And here we know that Kennedy graduated from that school, and when we got into office, although he was speaking out against communism, he was a total supporter of the United Nations and the blending of America into an international world government. He even had given some speeches, which I found, and I have the quotations in my book, where he says, America has too much gold, has too much wealth. We have to redistribute it among the world. In other words, he was right straight down the line on all of the globalist philosophies. So why would JFK be turning against the Federal Reserve System? Didn't make sense. Then I went and looked at, well, never in his whole political career did he ever speak against it. Never did he do anything that would interfere with the Federal Reserve in the slightest manner. So where did this thing come from out of the blue? Why would he try and tear it apart by signing this executive order? Okay, now it's time to go and get a copy of the executive order and read what it actually said. I'm taking too long perhaps on this, but what it actually did was to turn over the power that was, first of all, it had to do with creating Treasury notes.
Yeah, United States notes. Yeah.
United States notes that would back put gold backing or silver backing behind the United States notes that were authorized during the Civil War. Okay? That's what the origin of these things. And according to congressional mandate that dates all the way back to the Civil War, it had never been rescinded, so it's still law. The government was required to have so many of these notes in circulation. And so this was merely one of those bills that had been, these orders that had been done many times before to keep the circulation up to the quota. It was a minor amount. It wasn't a huge amount. It was merely a legislative function that he had to sign as president. But instead, he signed an executive order which basically said, hey, the president shouldn't be bothered with this anymore. This routine matter should be turned over, and we now give the power to sign this document to the Secretary of the Treasury. That's what the thing really said. It did not authorize the issuance of these things because it had already been authorized by Congress. He was transferring the power to okay it, to sign off on it, from the president's desk to the desk of the Secretary of the Treasury. Now, what does that mean? Who was the Secretary of the Treasury? Yeah. I think it was, I have to stop and think, was it, anyway, it was a banker. It was one.
As per usual.
Yeah, I forgot. I have to look it up. But anyways, he's part of this banking cabal. So what Kennedy really did is transfer power that belonged to him as the president. He gave it over to the banking system. That's what it really was all about. Anyway, it gets deeper than that. And it just, you come out the other end and say, whoop, there's another myth. That's all.
Well, absolutely. It does a disservice to truth when people look for information that'll benefit their narrative rather than truly search for the truth. And there's no doubt.
You know, we all do that, but then we have an obligation, if it's really important, to go back and challenge it and get to the original sources and make sure it's true.
Absolutely, and there's no doubt that Kennedy was I mean, I think it goes without saying that there was a cover-up in the assassination of President Kennedy, but at the same time, of course, looking into the history of John F. Kennedy and his family, they were a pretty scummy family, to say the least. They weren't actually good people, as so many people would like to believe, though people like their idols. People like to put people on a pedestal and look at individuals as legends and etc. But the JFK legacy, of course, has been defined by the assassination, which makes people more, I guess, sympathetic to his ideas without understanding the actual ideas. Looking into JFK, he did very similar things, allegedly, to women that people like Bill Clinton has done. It's gone a lot deeper than that, and all you have to do is look up JFK sexual harassment, JFK, executive orders, and there are some pretty sketchy details when you look into that.
You know, gentlemen, I don't think we need to destroy the reputation of JFK to, establish our position. And I shouldn't say destroy the reputation. That sounds like I'm criticizing you for bringing out what I know is basically true. But we don't even have to go there, because a lot of people really have a very deep feeling in their heart for JFK. He was, because he was assassinated and because he was standing against communism, or it appeared that way, and because he gave some great speeches, and he did a lot of good things for America. He became, when that bullet killed him, or bullets, it made a martyr out of him. Yeah. And so when you start attacking the character of a martyr, you're going uphill. A lot of people just shut down right away. How dare you challenge my saint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
It's a problem, but it's reality, so we have to be careful about that.
Well, that's the thing about idols within the collectivist, paradigms that we see today. A lot of people will say the same thing about President Obama. A lot of people will say the same thing about, Alexander Hamilton's another great example. And when you look into Alexander Hamilton, he was probably one of the first guys to really push the central banking system within the United States.
Yeah, well, what you see, we had a great dinner back in Montana for a little while ago with Griffin, and we were talking a little bit about the exchange stabilization fund. Now, I still have to send you some documentation over there that is very, very interesting, and I do believe a lot of things, hidden. They call it darker, the ESF's money darker than the CIA's money, because there's no trace of it. And of course the Treasury again is there, having full control over it. So it just shows you the Treasury and the connection with the Fed, like how the bankers have such deep control. More of the treasurer or the secretary is so powerful compared to the president a lot of times.
Well, absolutely. So regardless of what JFK did, obviously the establishment, the global establishment, wanted something different, and well, they got it, and we've seen that ever since. And it just keeps growing, the size and scope, the tentacles of globalism by the day.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized by the Anti-Defamation League on YouTube, as they flag all of our content as hate speech. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description in the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. You can also find me at @JoshSigurdson at Steemit.com. That's Steemit.com, the future of social media, as the dinosaur social media digs its own grave. You get paid in cryptocurrency, Steem that is, on Steemit.com via the upvote of your posts, so I hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Bye.